Hello and welcome to Leading Organization Case Discussion Session. So this is Harsh Mishra here, your faculty at Quantic. Before Quantic, I have been in the area of entrepreneurship, leadership, strategy, and global business at various B schools in the United States, and have also worked with institutions around the globe. I am interested and active in the startup world ever since early 90s. I've had a spell as an entrepreneur when I founded a startup school in 2013 in the domain of entrepreneurial learning for 5 years before exiting. I have mentored scores of early and advanced level stage startups and helped build the entrepreneurial ecosystem across the globe in various regions, starting with the New York Mid-Hudson region. With that introduction, let me pull up and share my screen. Just a moment. So we will begin with the introduction of the case on Dan Martel, a serial entrepreneurial leader. In case you could not read the case, this introduction will lay out the basics of the case for you. And if you have any questions, we can discuss them in about 5 minutes following the intro part. After the Q&A and interaction, we will break out into small groups. In your respective breakout group, you will discuss 2 basic questions on the case. The breakout session will last for about 15 to 20 minutes. I have provided the 2 questions on the case in the chat box. There is also a link in the chat box that should open in your browser. It is a Google Sheet with the same 2 questions, and you can make your notes during the breakout session on it. After the breakout session, all groups will come back and reassemble here. Each breakout group can then present the gist of your discussion around the 2 questions. And finally, in about last 5 minutes, I will share with you the learnings and the conclusive parts of our session today. All right, so now on to the introduction of the case. I had communicated about this case in the description part of today's session when you signed up for this webinar. So there I provided you with the link to the case. I expect that you would have given a look at this case, read it, and I hope we'd be able to discuss it properly. So let's dive into the case. We're discussing the case on Dan Martel on the topic of entrepreneurial leadership that is gaining significance in light of the growth in startup world. So our environment is changing and evolving, and so rapidly. You'll testify to that. So there are many pain points and gaps in the market, and the entrepreneurs are finding solution to a variety of problems facing the people of the world. So the leadership coming from the entrepreneurs is quite remarkable. It is a unique brand of leadership that demonstrates a mindset that is different from other kinds of leaders. I'm sure you've been exposed to other leadership theories. Our dynamic and increasingly resource-crunched world much needs this brand of leadership. I'm talking about entrepreneurial leadership. And today's case on Dan Martel will give us an inner view of the world of a serial entrepreneur who envisioned several tech solutions and led his ventures to success despite failures. Is there a leadership model in his life that we can learn from? Story of the Canadian serial entrepreneur, Dan Martel, and his entrepreneurial success journey. So far founded 5 ventures to date, and he's onto his 6th one. 2 of his ventures failed and were closed. The subsequent 2 ventures had successfully made profitable exits. And at the end of the case, Dan is working on his 5th one until I discover the 6th. So his first venture, maritimevacations.com, was a website building company for cottage and bed and breakfast services in Canada. His second venture, NB Host, was a web hosting service company. His third venture, Spheric Technology, was about customization of web portals, especially for large corporations such as P&G, Procter & Gamble, and Johnson & Johnson. And this venture was to build software that managed the deployment of web applications, portals, and intranets. So Dan's 4th venture is Flowtown, which was an innovative social media marketing platform business. And you would have read in details about the nature of that. So we're just going to touch on. Subsequent slide will go a little bit more into it. His fifth venture is a work in progress, where the case leaves us. He has named it Clarity, that will instantly connect budding entrepreneurs with successful entrepreneurs for their battle-tested advice and on demand. Interestingly, I spotted Dan's sixth venture yesterday. It's called the SaaS Academy for Growth Coaching. So always out to make success of a new emerging opportunity. You can see that pattern. Here is the picture, Dan's SaaS Academy in action. So the Academy is growing teams of high-performing, what they call the rock stars of SaaS founders. Now, Dan Martell's model of a successful serial entrepreneur. What leadership model can be drawn from Dan's serial entrepreneurial journey? Can it be learned from or modeled after? We would tell you that each venture, successful or unsuccessful, teaches you about new opportunity evaluation. That's what Dan would tell you, that entrepreneurs should look at three interrelated elements for their opportunity selection. One, the unmet need of people, the gaps in the marketplace, and the ability to improve on a suboptimal process through technology. So the usage of technology is quite at the heart of every venture that he pursued. He himself was a technologist. That entrepreneurs should not be limiting their potential customer base and picking too small a niche. It will destroy your business, he would say. Hence, in his model, choosing a big market opportunity is defining. And this is a hard lesson he learned from venture to venture. You know, he had started one with a sort of a regional venture before he went on to a larger venture, which was the national level. But even there, he ran into some high operating costs. So he was always mindful of a big market opportunity in the real sense, both financially as well as in terms of scale. He would also say that you should have the ability to separate not only the good from the bad, but also the great from the good. So as an entrepreneur, you should decipher between a good and great opportunity before investing scarce time, effort, and money that you have. He would encourage you to ask, is what is desired possible? Very good, well-framed question. Is what is desired possible? Is what is possible desired? You know, so if you look at these two questions totality, you will get a view of his mindset. And the example is, while he considered his user feedback, Martell would form an idea and begin searching the market to see if it or anything similar to it existed. If Martell could not find the solution he formulated, then perhaps this was a gap in the marketplace, and perhaps he could address the need. If the solution, product, or service did not exist, Martell would study its current functionality and consider ways in which he could improve it 10x. So Martell knew that only those solutions that offered exponential benefit could displace existing competitors. So great solutions, not just good, but great solutions he would strive for. Dan had a lean startup mindset, and he would frequently call potential clients, asking them about the type of problems they were encountering. He believed in early and continuous customer feedback, also defined as customer development process. And he believed that a great opportunity only satisfied a customer's needs to the extent that they are willing to pay for the product or service being offered. So this was really at the core of his belief. You know, he would not pursue any product otherwise, unless customers would have really the willingness to pay to that extent that it would turn it into a scalable venture. And when building a team or an organization, always keep the three key corners of talent triangle, you know, and if you look at that talent triangle in the case, it will talk about business acumen, domain expertise, and operational effectiveness. So the three sides of organization building, and his expertise mostly lied in being a technologist on the operations side or product development side. So he would draw upon the capabilities in the area of business acumen or domain expertise. He would often outsource it. Then he would also pay a lot of attention on business model. So he would innovate and deploy venture-specific, appropriate business model each time. So you would see that from venture to venture, you'd observe that. And he has a clear, tested vision in mind and be ready to work very, very hard. So he was visionary because he could see far in any domain, any industry. And that's what I would say entrepreneurial leaders are endowed with, that they can see the opportunity far into the space, into time, and then be able to build something. Of course, they're also wary of the changes that will come along the way and the learning that it would entail. So this is Dan Martell's entrepreneurial leadership model. So in his model, Dan would caution entrepreneurs not to think that doing a successful startup is easy. It is not. Like in the case of a startup which had a successful exit, the sheer value often paid to these companies can create a success bias in people's cognitive perception as to how difficult it was for that startup to get there. So they would really look at it very unrealistically and be imaginative in how many issues may have been involved and what did the entire journey really entail. So the rigorous roads that startups take often are underappreciated. This is a general case. So you look at securing venture-backed financing, working extremely long hours, building a minimum viable product, acquiring proof of concept, and developing sales. These are just a few of the common difficulties a startup encounters. So Dan was extremely familiar with this, and he was familiar with the exhausting process of such a startup life, which often goes underappreciated, especially the ones who are getting into it. They think that they can build and take an easy exit. So there's a caveat out there. And if you look at other aspects of his model, that comes from his character. So Dan was a risk taker. He treated chaos as his normal. He took huge risks during his younger years. However, the risk associated with being an entrepreneur, which may seem severe to some, do not seem hazardous to Martell at all. Because he had taken those kind of risks early in his life. So he would call the risks taken by an entrepreneur worthy risks, right? He was courageous. He believed that an entrepreneur's job is to quietly lead people into battle and victory, demonstrating courage, so no much hoopla about it, but he would quietly lead everyone to take risks and not be afraid, and himself being courageous in that sense. He was also adaptive. A true entrepreneur has a high adversity quotient and a keen ability to adapt to changing circumstances. And he really personified these, very adaptive. So Dan also learned from errors. Like many successful founders, he learned from the errors and took the necessary steps to ensure that he continuously improved going forward. Dan has grown confident of entrepreneurial capabilities over the time. He truly believed that he could turn a good idea into a startup, then turn a startup into a successful company, and in turn make money for himself and his investors. So this confidence grew over time from venture to venture, and that's why he has no two qualms about taking up a new idea, a new venture. Dan values being accountable, and he's humble. So he is no longer motivated by money or fame alone. Of course, it's a motivator, but not alone. His motivation today lies in his accountability that he has for people, specifically to his family, his employees, and his customers. And then, as they say, he is a serial entrepreneur. Once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. So Dan was just that. He stepped out twice from good jobs to follow his guts as an entrepreneur. He left his long, luxurious vacations to take up another venture because he believed that he had certain skills that it would be a disservice not to do what he was meant for. So he burnt with a sense of mission, make the world a better place through his technology and software knowledge or capabilities that he had. So he was not there to lie away from it for too long. So he walked away from his even earn-out purchase agreement that he had with Demand Force, and he essentially stepped out 3 months earlier, losing money. But that was not any hesitation for him, because he wanted to go into his new venture, which really required his full attention. Now, if you look at his history and background, Dan Martel, to develop his entrepreneurial leadership qualities, his past and especially his childhood seems highly relevant. So let's take a quick look at it. Dan Martel was born in a small city in Canada, and since the childhood, he was entrepreneurial. So there's one small story out there. Even as a young boy, Martel instinctively noticed and capitalized on opportunity. For example, he would frequently build snow forts behind his home, and would rent them out to his friends for a few dollars a day and make his first profit. And then, interestingly, he was a special child. He was diagnosed with ADHD. We know that condition that people have. But, it never became his weakness. Rather, it became his strength going down the line. So that was remarkable. And if you look at also his childhood, very challenging. His parents got divorced at an early age. Of course, he had a little rebellious situation when he was 11, because he was not getting enough attention, and then his parents divorced, and he was moved to a foster home, and those kind of episodes. Then he also faced a drug situation, and between the age of 13 and 15, he broke into cars and dealt drugs. At the age of 15, he was arrested for drug-related activities, and at age 17, he was arrested again on drug-related charges. Being a repeat offender, he was sent to prison for 9 months. But that's when the turnaround happened. He decided he needed to change his life and checked himself into a rehabilitation center after coming out of the prison. And the rest is history. He became a successful entrepreneur and had a happy family to which he was totally committed. So you can see, this is the picture. Because he believed in being accountable to his family, employees, market investors. So he's desirous of a happy and committed family. And this picture would testify of his commitment. And of course, I learned some other accounts. So he's truly a good family man. He finds as much time as possible away from his busy life. Now, let's quickly look at the ventures. We lost some time in getting this thing going. So his first venture, Dan had bought a computer programming book while at the rehabilitation center, taught himself how to program, and began writing computer applications after computer applications. And he never looked back as a software developer after that. So for his first venture, at his dad's advice, he started building websites for small cottage rental business. Interestingly, he went on to validate his venture idea beforehand as a proof of concept. So very smart thing to do. Before he would really go into it seriously, he first checked their interest. And there, he was flooded by mail and the checks, and the venture basically rolled on. He was profitable in this venture, but soon Dan's cottage website business went under as a new big competitor entered the fray. So this was a national player, and basically he was not competitive. And that's when he learned a very important lesson, that you got to be in a bigger market. Now, if you look at his second venture, you would find that characteristic. So the nature of the second tech venture was a hosting service company. So not making website, but hosting website on the server. So for businesses, and that would be anywhere in the country, not region specific. And this time, Dan made sure not to limit his client base, and a large demand for websites as company was moving online. This was building up. The demand for hosting companies would increase, hence, because the demand for website was increasing, therefore, for the hosting as well. But Dan faced a number of challenges. So first was that the entry barrier of capital. So hosting equipment and software were not as common in those days as they are today, which made them very expensive. So he had to spend approximately $20,000, most of which that he had saved from his previous venture onto this new venture altogether. So he went on to build his client base for NB Host. He realized that he was going sideways instead of upwards, purely because the revenue he was making from hosting needed to be re-injected back into his company to cover an increase in operating costs for every new client's website that he did, that he hosted. And the more clients he got, the more time and work was needed to be invested in the company. And that really kept him working round the clock. Something he felt was not the best thing, right? So he realized that it was not a scalable business, right? And he constantly operating in a depleted state inhibited his ability to progress. And he realized that you cannot monetize a good opportunity if that opportunity requires constant support and supervision. So Dan closed NB Host and taking a hit of $15,000, right? Loss of $15,000. And his learning from this venture was grow revenue exponentially while only growing expenses linearly. So, the differential between the revenue and the expenses, this should be growing exponential. Therefore, otherwise is not so lucrative a business to be in. Now, if you go to the third venture, which is Spheric Technology, and for this one, he customized web portals for big corporations to manage the deployment of web applications, portals, and intranets. So now he had a team that completed his talent triangle, the three things in the talent triangle, which is business acumen, operational experience, and domain knowledge. He was good at operational experience or development, but not so much in business acumen and domain knowledge. So they focused on building the software applications and outsource the business related activities to people like you, all of you who are doing, EMBA here or MBA, he would source it to them, right? He would focus on his product development. So Dan and his team at Spheric Technology bootstrapped the company from onset. So they had realized that larger the value added a company can provide, the faster the potential adoption of its product. So a common characteristic of a survivor bootstrapped company. So they wanted to provide a whole lot of value to the company and more efficiently and faster. And that would become the competitive advantage, even for a startup, in the eyes of corporations that he was going to serve, like Johnson & Johnson or Procter & Gamble, as I mentioned earlier. So Spheric's technology added value to its customers at a time when those customers needed it the most. So his clients were these big corporations, and he had created the company which really had no debt. It grew at an average of 152% per year and had approximately now 30 employees. So in May of 2008, not surprisingly, Dan Martel sold Spheric Technologies to Function One, which is a software company specializing in enterprise technology. At the age of 27, Dan Martel officially became a millionaire before he moved on to his fourth venture, Flowtown. So Dan's fourth venture was a social marketing application for small businesses. His software allowed a customer to take any email address and find the social demographic of the person to whom the email address belonged. Remarkable product, right, that he strived for. So a business using Flowtown could then use that information to launch more focused and targeted marketing campaigns. And these days, these are quite common, such products. Rather, we might have gone into a new generation of such products. But in those days, it was truly desirable product, right? So, and this time, if you would notice that unlike the previous Spheric technology, which was B2B product, this time it is B2C, or rather B to small business, still B2B, but small businesses. And Dan this time had his skin in the game with investment of $200,000. And like a lean startup creative crusader that he was, Dan first tested the market for his product by launching a non-functional demo of their proposed solution. So there's a whole story there, you would have noticed. Through this, basically, he had found a worthwhile value proposition with massively growing demand for social media marketing. So he may have been one of the early pioneers of this technique. Now, of course, many software developers do that. They try to trick their market and really get their feedback, even though they haven't developed the product yet. But he was perhaps one of the early ones. That is the way to build viable products. You try to get early feedback from the market. And Dan's Flowtown now generated to the tune of $20,000 per month of revenue. And soon he had more than 50,000 customers, substantial. Now look at, and these 50,000 customers mean 50,000 small businesses were his customers. So no, obviously, if you look at, Flowtown was created in November of 2009, and in October 2011, so less than 2 years, Demandforce purchased Flowtown. So Demandforce is a company based out of San Francisco, focused on providing small businesses with access to the tools and platforms that large enterprises use to communicate with customers. So the interest of Demandforce and Flowtown, you could see, were aligned, right? They were in similar industry. And so Flowtown basically complemented Demandforce, and that has implication on when they bought this company on the valuation, because if that alignment is high, you would get a much better high value. So I don't remember exactly what value he realized, but it was substantial and talk of the town. Now, if you look at the fifth venture, and the case ends with it, Clarity. It was interesting how this idea came up. So the news of Dan Martell's second successful exit spread. Naturally, a flurry of telephone calls from startup founders came to Martell. Right? So Martell spoke to and advised as many, but could not really devote all his time. So he was getting like floods of calls and everyone asking what is the secret, or they had some problem in their decision making and they would want a word from him. And so now, looking at that, Dan's new goal was to help entrepreneurs around the world. And that was the time when there was almost like an entrepreneurial revolution. Of course, that revolution continues to move forward, but that time it was fairly widespread. So scores of entrepreneurs around the globe, and they need advice from successful entrepreneurs. So he considered a new business opportunity that he would call Clarity, a marketplace of entrepreneurs for who are seeking battle-tested advice from experts in particular field. Dan wanted to ensure that this solution that he had in mind was not catering to a niche market. That, of course, he was always wary of. But in this case, the market seemed huge, it was timely, and it would be durable because entrepreneurs and their problems and decision-making challenges would continue to prevail. It's not going to go away. So this market is not going anywhere. And that's why he was very excited. And really, it came to him, almost inadvertently. So the Clarity was to be turned into despite this apparent opportunity was there, but it was to be turned into a viable, scalable, sustainable, and profitable business model. He always would keep his eyes on that, so not get carried away, but really assess the viability, scalability, and sustainability of it. And so Dan asked a set of highly relevant questions. He asked himself, would people pay for this? Would there be enough people wanting to pay? Would experts, okay, a participant requests the live transcription by enable. Okay, I have enabled that. So Dan asked a set of these questions, which I just mentioned, like would people pay? Would there be enough people wanting to pay? Would experts consider shifting their goodwill free calls into an income stream? Would such an income stream be big enough for true experts to bother? Because they are successful entrepreneurs, their time is valuable. If they really systematically as a business devote their time for entrepreneurs, they would want it to be generating revenue for them. So he went on to find out whether or not people are willing to pay for the service before he went ahead and built it. He would always do that. Interestingly, Martel's early user testing confirmed that people wanted to access the tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is the key word, that because you ask any successful person, what is the key to your success? It's not that they can articulate it in one sentence. There's so many aspects of it. They would engage with you into a conversation, because knowledge is tacit. So how do experts really pass it on? What really made them a successful entrepreneur, right? So that is the challenge as a product, but then would people have the willingness to pay? So he considered this entire thing, proposition carefully, and that was his fifth venture, for which he stepped out, took a hit in terms of income, and he was out there. We have completed the introduction part of the case, and the two questions are: one, learning from the case, what objective criteria should a founder evaluate before committing wholeheartedly in a startup? Could there be a set of those factors? What should they look at? What should anybody look at before they go into this intense, demanding work that a startup needs? It's not without it. We looked at that caveat. So that's the first question. How can you be objective, not subjective? Because subjectively, every entrepreneur is very excited about their idea. But is there any objectivity? Is there any real potential there? So that is the first question. The second question is, what traits and learnings of Dan Martel as a successful serial entrepreneur can be emulated by a startup founder? So what is the generalizable aspect? Can we really capture? And there was a slide that we looked at, but then we would want to discuss it further, right? And we would like to get your thoughts on this. So I have posted these two questions in the chat box for you to discuss during the breakout session. Now we can spend some time interacting on the case. Any questions and comments from you? Any thoughts, any questions, any comments? We can spend another 5 minutes, and then we can break out into a group. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So people are hearing it. Yeah, any thoughts that came to your mind on any of these questions, or any clarification you need from me before we break out into sessions, various groups? We can spend some time discussing these two questions in small groups, then come back here and maybe go through some conclusive part.
Thanks, Doctor. Very clear, because I think I just read the what do you call this, the case study, and it was, I think you're highlighting the salient points. I just had this thought in mind. Would any startup represent such a trait? Because today we are talking about the tech world, right? There are startups which are very brick and mortar, which are very much back to the good old days, example F&B and whatnot, may not be disrupted by technology. So I'm not sure whether those questions are applicable.
Okay, so that's a good point. I would say, Alan, that there are tech startups which have tech products. So there, of course, they're building such a product, and their buyers are also, the market is also tech consumers, basically. So that's a different category. And then you have tech enabled, and there it could be different degree. So you would have companies which use bare minimum technology, but yet they could be still at the forefront of technology, because somewhere the processes still have justification for, there is a brick and mortar, but you would see that even small businesses today, they need their tech interface, right, with the external world, and they can gain efficiencies And also they can sense the market through technology. So even though they are not so tech heavy or so dependent on tech or cutting edge technology development internally, but the tech enablement is almost integral. And even if there is a model which has a lot of non-tech aspect, uh, you would see that whether brick and mortar, you look at music industry, you still find some brick and mortar spaces, but now increasingly it's unheard of that anybody consumes or buys music from a brick mortar setup. But yeah, there are several industries, several products where brick and mortar would be inevitable. But what would that blend be? What would that mix be? And I think technology would continue to, in one form or the other, play a role, different degrees. So I would say for any startup to really figure out how much of technology can give them an edge. And this is the role of entrepreneurial leader. They're insightful to find out that critical component and how it would be absorbed in the startup idea. Even I would say the companies which could be functioning in rural areas, where on spaces like agriculture, you would see that technology, appropriate technology for even that kind of space has been developed. Whether it is in the area of pricing or in terms of these robotics, or drone technology to do the fertilization, right? Or taking various metrics to measure the productivity and do the predictability to. So you have technology usage even in such areas where traditionally you would not have seen.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Technology is definitely disrupting almost every single space of our industry. Agri-tech, health tech, there are so many ed tech as well. Because I was thinking of the question is diverting us. So basically, if my understanding is correct, startup is definitely related to technology based or technology enabled, in your words, kind of ventures. All right, it's not so much on those perhaps a large corporation, public listed. It's basically a very new so-called experimental venture or model to be scalable and profitable. I think that's the word that we are looking for.
But I believe it's not just on the
And
technology,
even if you
right?
consider, yeah, Lydian, please.
Yeah, so I believe startup is starting from ideas, but because of technology and things are improving in speed, therefore technology seems to be overtaking a lot of even natural, what do you call, entrepreneurs. Like, it could be in plantations, agricultural, but because the publicity in agricultural is not as quick and fast as technology, therefore it seems to be perceived that technology is a lot faster or has got more startups. I'm just wondering, there could be other startups in other areas, right? It should not be just technology.
I'm sorry, the last part of your question is asking if you can clarify the question, please.
Ellen was saying that a lot of startups are mainly in technology or tech advancements, right? But I believe startups can apply to other areas. One example, probably agricultural. But because of speed these days and publicity-wise, it seems that technology has taken over the startup space. But in fact, there are more areas like biochemical research and things like that. This could also be startups, right?
Yes. I mean, startups are all over, in the sense, essentially, the need for startup is driven by the speed of change that's happening in the environment, in the value space, right? If those changes were stable, then probably startups wouldn't be able to assert itself. But you would see that change has become so inevitable because of high number of factors, but also high competitiveness. And the technology, it happens both ways. Sometimes the market dictates the change of technology or the speed of technology. And in some cases, the technology itself sparks changes in the environment. So it's both ways. So it's very, I would say, broad ranging, all pervasive presence of tech part. I'm not saying it's always the cutting edge technology, but at the same time, if you would realize, so earlier we used to think that the big corporations are the users of most advanced technology. But nowadays, that may not be true. Some of these smaller startups are more agile to really capture the flavor of technology and adapt to it and develop it. And then the larger corporations are looking out for those startups who are doing some of those breakthrough technology to absorb them, to encourage them, to invest into them. So even at a small scale, which startups which are emerging and in a space which is not traditionally tech savvy, but they bring in some level of technology. Appropriate technology has a very important role, where the technology is of a very high, not a very high level, but it is very suited and fitted for that space. So sometimes the startups come up in that way.
So basically, it's innovation, right?
Innovation.
Any new innovation.
Right.
I think just to add on to what Lilian said, I mean, because relating to what Doctor was putting up the last two questions, right? I don't think we need to go even for break talk, but I think we can, because I appreciate the questions and the case study, Doctor. Just to let you know, I actually just finished my startup entrepreneurship specialization. So everything is like falling into place. I realized the customer discovery is being in real life. Dan Martel is really doing it. He has been asking a lot of feedbacks from the customers. He go for primary research rather than secondary research, right? So a lot of those points are very relevant, and of course customer validation and whatnot. But something came up across my mind. If you don't mind me asking this right now.
Please,
I hope I didn't disrupt the pattern.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Because go ahead, please.
Yeah, please.
No, I'm just saying you did not disturb the pattern at all, because we have just two of you now. And do you think we should break out into a group, or we should just discuss here itself?
Lilian and myself, we are comfortable. I think it's also a very good intellectual discourse we are having right now. So, because I just had this contemplation as you were so-called sharing the salient points earlier. You see, most of the notes, I'm not sure about Lilian whether she has done that specialization, but most of the things that I'm studying right now in this EMBA, it seems that it is well documented based on a lot of real life case study like Dan Martel. Even in my part of the world where I am based at, we had recently Property Guru, which was just listed. The co-founder, Steve Melwish, also did something similar on the path. If you can research on his LinkedIn as well. He did, I think, almost 3 to 5 ventures simultaneously, and I think it's not so. It's quite kind of simultaneously, something like 2, something like that. And of course, the first few was a flop, and then eventually, I think things are more clearer. And today, you see, Property Guru is the largest Southeast Asia startup. But a startup that lasted how long? 14 years before they get listed in New York Stock Exchange. So the question that came up to me is that it seems that we are learning the EMBA theories from startup world, but people like Dan Martel, which we have seen his history, has never done an MBA before. So he has not studied about primary research, about customer validation, customer discovery, and I'm just curious whether some of the successful things that we are supposed to do in our startup ventures, should we just follow the flow, just like Dan Martel? I'm sure when he was doing it, he didn't refer to any modules, MBAs, whatnot. Maybe he has some mentors. Maybe he have Dr. Harsh, or people who are more academic, or people who are more exposed. Because today he's mentoring, right? He's mentoring with Clarity, with all these successful people. So he's just sharing. It's just like Elon Musk. Elon Musk also has something similar. He has the Asperger syndrome, something like Dan has ADHD. So those days, in the early days, Bill Gates and the late Steve Jobs, they are dropouts. So we are like putting a lot of case studies into theories. But I'm just trying to turn the table now. I mean, if you don't mind, is to see that could actually we just have to go ahead with our desire, passion, and dream to do something persistently. Could that be just as simple as that, rather than to contextualize some of these things into a theory form and say that, okay, we must do this, we must have this, the what you call it, the triangle thing and stuff like that. So I'm just having this thought in my mind right now. What do you think?
Okay, very good, very good. I think that's a very compelling question that you have raised. It is, I'm sure, in many people's mind, it's very relevant. And what I would say is most of the successful entrepreneurs that I have seen and interacted and mentored or even invested partially have been the ones who eventually get to have a good theory and a good practice, right? Both. People who start with practice, let's say they did not go to any formal MBA program or like Montech or elsewhere. What they do is they develop certain theory in their mind with their practice. So they get to some theory and that's what they afterwards want to propagate. Like Dan Martel, after this entire journey, now he's running the accelerator program for SaaS Academy. And there he shares his theory. He uses his theory that he has developed over a course of time to tell others how not to make those classical mistakes, or even making clear a framework, so when you work within a framework, because after all, entrepreneurs, they take risks and then they learn how to manage the risks. So to somewhere they start becoming systematic, so they may start with a lot of chaos and innovation and sort of a path-breaking thinking, but eventually they settle into some sort of a evolution of a system. So that's one path. The other is people who go through some programs. So it's not that entrepreneurs have not come out of MBA programs. Large number of entrepreneurs have come out of MBA programs as well. Maybe Elon Musk did not go through it and several others. So they come with some framework and that is at the back of their mind. And then they start learning from the practice, So there is a learning both ways, people who move from theory to practice or practice to theory. But ultimately, success demands that you have a good theory, a good scientific mind, which you're putting to test, because that's the basic principle of, let's say, lean methodology, lean startups you would have heard of. Lean startups essentially begin with some sort of a hypothesis, and then they put it to experiment, and whether they accept or reject the hypothesis, there's a learning, and then they carry out that cycle. And that also helps them make those strategic shifts whenever is required, or they can make pivoting, meaningful pivoting, not uninformed pivoting, because that could be very costly. So they repeat the cycle with a scientific mind. So when you think about the scientific mind, even management is a science, it's a science part of it. So somewhere you're exposed to some frameworks and that gets crystallized in your mind, you could use that, for your, so after that, it is you and the market. It's not that there are any set rules, you can go about it with a very open mind, with a very adaptive mind, like Dan Martel did. And in some cases, if you can short circuit this process, so Dan's experience tells you that you could start from scratch and keep on learning. He had an open mind and he was learning through experiences and he was improving his assumptions over a period of time, right? So now later he gained some maturity. He developed a lens with which he could look at the market in a more meaningful way. So that's the advantage. I'm saying MBA graduates, from a good school or from good ground may not be a guarantee that they could be an entrepreneurial success, but in many cases, they have a little advantage also, a different kind of advantage. In case of those who haven't gone through the formal frameworks, they have a different advantage, because they're open. They could be doing some higher order thinking. They could think out of the box, right? So, and they could be more of a risk taker because they have less to lose, and so it's both ways, Alan. This is what I have seen. I have been an entrepreneur myself, as I said in the beginning. I started with a theory because I was teaching the subject for a long period of time. And I said, okay, in entrepreneur learning space, I should do this startup and institution. But I had some advantage, but I also had some disadvantage, So some of the things did not occur to me. So we did go through some pivoting process, and eventually I took an exit, meaningful exit. But I always felt that I wish I had gone through some of the other frameworks, and that could have helped me not make some of those classical mistakes. So that took the long answer short. A good theory and a good practice, whichever way you go about it. But entrepreneurs, therefore, are wholesome people. Even though they may be operating at a small scale, but they're very wholesome people. And this is why we had this topic of entrepreneurship as leadership, because there's a new breed which is emerging, right? Entrepreneurs actually bring a different kind of leadership on the table. And today the world is that entrepreneurship is more or less unsaid requirement, even for large corporations, anybody who works there, because they want to create new revenue streams. They want to have an advantage of developing some new products.
Intrapreneurship, right?
Entrepreneurship, right? It's becoming a way of life at different levels in different forms. They have corporate venturing, they have investment funds within the corporations, and they don't necessarily invest in their own people wherever they see the opportunity. And they try to keep the environment as open. Even Google, you may think, I was talking to my son, he's a techie, he's in tech products. And initially he couldn't believe when we were discussing that Google would also be looking out for smaller startups which are at the cutting edge, and they wait for it to grow. They don't give it a formal title of Google, calling it a Google startup. They wait and watch until they make sufficient progress, then they invest, But this is very purposefully so, because if they take on them very early and invest in them, the chances of their failing is higher. So it's very interesting question.
Yeah. So I believe this is just part of their assessment, whether it's worth investing or not. Especially, with theories, you can make out some rough estimation or calculated risk. So they are waiting until they have substantial information before they start off with that investment. But I think from another perspective, would you believe that behavioral traits actually does play a role instead of just depending theoretically? Because, being human, we are all unique in our ways, our behaviors, our traits as a person. You have introverts, extroverts, and being an introvert, I would see it could be a very difficult way to start up, but theoretically they would be very good at reading because, they always read a lot more and observe, right? But do you share the same opinion that actually behavioral traits does make a difference in entrepreneurship?
Yes, I think I would tell you that there's a trait theory of entrepreneurship. That means people who have those special traits, right? They are inborn, they have it inherently in them, and they are the ones who eventually become, they have more risk-taking ability or a number of other things that we listed under Dan Martell. And he had those, for example, ADHD and how he turned it around. So the traits part is one. But behavioral aspect where learning is the focus, right? And a smart learning. So for example, I use methodology, and I've done some research on that, and some where I call it diagonal method of learning. That is a smart learning because you are not getting too theoretical. You are choosing, you're giving a direction and you're choosing to learn those aspects which are relevant for you. So there's a higher degree of relevancy. So that's the way you learn. And so this school of learning entrepreneurship and learning how to manage risk, this is taking a greater prominence. So for example, entrepreneurial mindset, this kind of a construct, entrepreneurial mindset talks about you may not be born with certain traits, but if you can learn how to do certain posturing, for example, strategic orientation or the way you use your resources, the way you build your team, if some of those learnings can happen, then your behavior changes as an entrepreneur. You gain to become an entrepreneur by behavior. That is taking a greater significance because that also opens up possibility for a large number of people to grow to become an entrepreneur. Otherwise we will have to wait for the great entrepreneurs to fall from the sky, right? We don't see that in today's world, right? We see that somebody who had never thought about entrepreneurship, right? Or let's say, who could have thought that so many women in this world are now successful entrepreneurs, right? And they're growing. This number is growing increasingly. Or people from certain cultures and countries, earlier it may have been limited, but now it has been democratized to such an extent, right? And people are engaging in a lot of learning. Earlier, the investors would not interact much. They're only thinking about the investment. But these days, like Dan Martel, you would see, they would engage with other entrepreneurs. They would actually grow through their experiencing of nurturing other entrepreneurs. So all of that belongs to the behavioral school, where your focus is on entrepreneurship as a behavior. Yeah.
Actually, there is a shift of mindset, I believe. In olden days,
Yes.
people would think sharing out something and somebody takes over the idea and they become the loser, right? But today, because things are moving so fast, in fact, when they reach out to people, they are also receiving ideas. And through all these ideas that's contributed by different people, just like Google, right? Probably they have so many startups, but it could end up that they can cherry pick one or two and combine it, and it becomes greater and they complement each other. It should not be alone. I think this is probably the direction. And because of the speed, this is where it's going or heading towards, I believe.
Right. Because entrepreneurs are no more lone rangers, they have to network, they have to learn, they have to collaborate, and they have that art for it. They have to be out there and that's how you learn about the market. Let's say if you are an inventor isolated in a laboratory, right? And this is something which I learned from, I was in a conference and I met this woman. She was an IBM executive holding the largest number of patents in IBM. This I'm talking about 15 years back. And what she told me is, you won't believe that 90% of my patents are like redundant. They're not being used. They're just sitting there. The patents on which I worked so much. And what she said, it's because the isolated invention kind of a mentality, where you are not in touch with market, where you're not interacting with people, you're not in the ecosystem, right? That is now less of a viable model for entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
I just want to,
yeah, sorry.
Alan, I want to ask, where are you based?
I'm from Malaysia.
Malaysia, okay, wonderful.
Yeah, so it's,
Kuala Lumpur, is that where you are?
Yes. Have you been to this part of the world?
I have not been to Kuala Lumpur, but I am going to be there at some point. I have a good friend who lives there and works. So Kuala Lumpur, I've heard a lot from.
Quantic Bangkok conference is just like north of Malaysia. So
yes, yes.
Yeah, hopefully we can meet up one day.
Yeah,
but I have a confession to make.
Sure.
I have a confession to make. I've been in entrepreneurship for close to 2 decades, 20 years. And I've seen and witnessed how things have changed. And I do concur with what Lillian has said. I mean, in the early days, we don't have this terminology called even startup, venture capital, and stuff like that. I think yourself also, you have seen those days in the West, right? Where you have been doing. And today, I think it's because of the internet and the technology of cloud computing, as well as also the ecosystem for venture-backed so-called entrepreneurship. It gives a lot of hope to a lot of entrepreneurs, because I myself, I have done many things since my first degree. And those days I didn't even aware that it was a business itself. We were doing even from car wash to giving tuitions and photocopier machines and stuff like that. But today, I think it is more structured, and I think it is actually good, because it gives a lot of hope to many entrepreneurs, because as you see, the stats are not in our favor, right? First 5 years, there's many dropouts, many business will fail. Despite knowing all these things about how we should make a business by theory, somehow things can fail. So I myself, I have also I've started and exited before, and I have plenty of also failed case studies. In fact, today I'm still looking into 2 or 3 more ventures. Thanks to the pandemic, I think we have seen a new opportunity cropping up in part of Asia as well. So yeah, it's very interesting. In fact, I was looking forward to your session to kind of throw ideas and bounce ideas with you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Alan. I'm so happy to meet you, and especially learning that you have had such a long spell as an entrepreneur, and you have that keen familiarity with the space, and you are still planning to pursue some of these new ventures. And you're right. I think the investment environment has also dramatically changed, in just last 10 years also, I would say, since 2013, when I launched my venture, until today. There's substantial change.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alan,
Space is
feel
much
free
more.
to include me.
Definitely.
The
Yes.
difference is I have lots of thoughts. The only thing is I dare not make the first move, because number one, capital is very important. Number two, how are you going to generate the money that you have lost? And especially when you have financial burden, right? So that actually literally stopped me. And during my old days in school, or I would say during my college or uni time, in some subjects we have you have year-end projects kind of thing, and you have to think what you want to develop. And during my time, everyone was saying, oh, let's build what do you call, like a medical system or school attendance system or supermarket card, at that point of time. And I came out with something very different. I was trying to combine artificial intelligence with 3D, and 3D was upcoming at that time. Unfortunately, where I was at that time, with the, I would say, uni or the the academic school at that time was not ready to go that far forward. And that actually helped me completely from advancing, because I don't get the help, right? And to be very honest, at that time, I actually came up with the idea. I call it Cyber Nanny. And that was like probably 20 years ago or more. Oh, I gave up my age. Anyway, so my idea was actually to build an artificial intelligence of inference engine, which is what you see, some sort like Sophie today. And why do I call it Cyber Nanny? It's meant to be for older kids to take care of older kids at home, whereby, kids being kids, they are old enough to take care of themselves, but they need knowledge and information to help them throughout the day or the routine or chores. So my idea was actually to put in a lot of knowledge, like the kid can ask, what can I have for today? Probably the, Cyber Nanny can say, oh, you can, there's food in the fridge, or you can heat it up at this temperature, giving instructions. So it's like intelligent at that time. But back then, the technology wasn't there, but inference engine was already there. And you actually require a lot of help to build this, because for me alone, trying to learn at that point of time, but I may not have sufficient resources. And to be honest, I somehow I do not know where I get the courage. I started writing to people that I found through my research. And I met a few guys, one from IBM, one from, not met, over the email, one IBM, one Microsoft. And they are very happy and they say, I'm more than happy to sponsor you over, but you have to buy your flight tickets. Come over and I will provide you accommodation and time for your research. And that's where I stopped, because cost at that time, I had to, from Malaysia, I'm actually a Malaysian living in Singapore. Traveling there takes like more than 10K just for the flight. And I literally stopped there.
Lillian, you can pursue your cyber nanny as a capstone. Don't forget, EMBA, you have a capstone, yeah?
Join me. But Sophie is already here now, and they switch off Sophie, right?
Of course, we can always, pivot and stuff like that. I think it's that's why I said it's I appreciate this. In fact, I have one question for Dr. Harsh. I'm not sure whether it's relevant or okay. I noticed there was a moonshot that was previously promoted. It was a very, very good idea, and I think it basically gives a different environment to EMBA. But unfortunately, I also noticed that most of the people that I met in EMBA are mainly in the corporate. They are basically in a large corporation. I was trying to network with a lot of entrepreneurs myself, and that's actually one of the bigger reason why I joined so-called Quantic. I find myself only a tiny percentage of the global cohort. So I'm not sure, if there would be more platform for those moonshot.
Right.
I stayed up until 4:30 a.m. just to listen to yourself explaining the deck, previously in the few months back.
Oh, okay, wonderful. First of all, I'm happy that you both are in neighborhood to each other, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, not far from each other. If you have to connect or even meet, I would say it'll be less of a, and you both are interested in this. So Lillian, you can, with some pivoting, as Alan was saying, you may consider, in some shape and form your idea, and to your question, Lillian, Alan, Moonshot is our first attempt to go in that space. And you're right that large number of students come from bigger corporations who are working there. But, there are many of them who want to go in the space, right? That's why when I look at capstone projects, a good number of them have attempted to individually or as a team come up with a new idea, a very high percentage. If you compare it to other B schools, right? Because other places that I have been, I did not see this pattern in the MBA program, but it's relatively high at Quantic. And then we are going to do a number of other things, starting with the moonshot, to build the ecosystem, and some talk is going on. So you would see increasingly, and some of the newer programs which are coming up would have a greater emphasis on entrepreneurship, right? So I would say going forward, what I would say also, if you're active in the network that you have, you may find a lot more people, who are out there, maybe from different cohorts.
I joined quite a number of student organizations as well. I think I'm in 7 or 8 of them. So I'm trying to basically, thanks to our time zone as well, I joined mostly after the evening, like now until midnight over here. So a lot of intellectual discourse is going on, but of course, perhaps I'm not sure whether distance is an issue. So even myself, I'm planning to do my capstone within the people around my same time zone. I think that's only more practical,
Right. No, both of you come from that part of the world which is going to see a lot of innovation in entrepreneurship. It is already happening, and you would take it to the new heights. Regardless, sometimes people work for long in corporations, but eventually, if that spark is there, that desire, they get there. So people have different paths. But I think going forward, this is why this topic of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial leadership, because there was a time when people used to be only managers. Then the changes came about, so then there was talk about leadership, and that's why you have leadership programs around the world, right? But going forward, I think it's the entrepreneurial leadership would also take prominence, because
Yes,
organizations do not just need leaders to manage their existing businesses, but they also want to grow into something else, more dynamic, more competitive. So that's where they need entrepreneurial behavior, mindset, traits, you name it. They're looking for those talents.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been speaking with a lot of our so-called faculty members. Not many are thinking the way you are thinking. In fact, I speak to Alex before, Alex, VP of Enterprise Learning, Alex Broadbeck. He basically agreed with what I shared with him, because most these schools are managerial electives and whatnot. In fact, I appreciated the formality of the theories because I myself have been executing it. It's just that now putting into this, there could be more understanding as well when we deal with our so-called management and staff.
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
but
That's
this, in fact, right, all these theories is very is driven by human mainly because part of our human brain uses structured manner, right? So when people get into the structured manner, they forget how to use survival skills in that sense, meaning to say, when you're thrown into something and they just got stuck. And I see the traits that what's happening today, people are trying to go back to where it was before. Imagine, back then, who invented computer? It's not a whole group of people, right? It's just 1 or 2%. And a lot of innovation came from 1 or 2%. Ultimately, it's just the idea and how the idea gets developed, right? But today, big corporations, they just want to run, everything becomes silo and structured. And in the end, it's just routine.
That's right. That's right. Therefore, entrepreneurs are very nimble. You can start with yourself, absolutely, on any idea, but also form team, 1 or 2, one person, another person. That is a big development in itself. If you can find another complementing team, you would see it would go a long way to expedite some of the things, and eventually invest. Yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah, I want to go back to Dan Martel. He did not really have any partners, right, in his case study, and also no venture backing. He basically snowballed his profits or his so-called exit into I think the third venture. So it's like what Lilian is saying. In the early days, everyone is like very much alone doing it. Today we have today is a business model itself, venture capitalists, because ultimately the general partners have to make back some money for the limited partners, right? So that's scary actually. In fact, some of the models that I was trying to structure is that, should we really want to sacrifice our equity so early in the early stage of our business? Can we do it organically? But then again, there is another story out there, is that if we don't go for this IPO roadmap or the financial roadmap that we designed for IPO, it seems that there is a loss of opportunity because there are so many venture, angel investors like yourself. So many people are out there throwing the money. So there was this, I think I read once in a Harvard Business School review. It says that, the trend now for startup is actually to burn more money, to burn people money, rather than to bootstrap yourself too much. I'm not sure how true is that, because it's very,
that's right.
It's the devil's advocate.
Yeah. No, there is virtue in Lilian, please. Go ahead, please.
I think it's actually depends on what you value most, right? Like you say, it's neither wrong or right, in the sense that you want to go IPO, maybe you grow rich faster, so-called, right? Because you're diversifying. But at the same time, you lose the niche qualities that you have. I that's my perception, I would say.
Yeah, the big money mindset is not necessarily the best producer of the best kind of startups. Bootstrap, I believe in that virtue, because bootstrapping gives you a different kind of learning and sensibility. Eventually at the right time, when you have really, and it really helps founders shape up their product. Also, number of ways they learn, they realize that they're not, as you rightly said, they're not giving out equity too early, right? And they haven't seen their potential of the venture come to a point where they can, in a timely way, bring the investors in, right? So there's a right time for that. And bootstrapping is a precursor, it's a desirable, but there's an art of bootstrapping. Bootstrapping can be also detrimental if people do not use it as a real art. So using the least resources to capture maximum value, right? So there are some ground rules of bootstrapping. I have seen startups don't follow that, and that's when they put themselves at risk. In that case, they are better off taking an exit into some investment, if possible, if they have built it up. So yeah, there are many things to discuss. I know we have gone past our time, but it's been really great talking to both of you. And I would say, if you pay attention to this case, and I have found this case fairly wholesome and comprehensive. There is those basic points out there which can help one, right? Very relevant. I'm sure you would have experienced it yourself, but this one articulates, it articulates what is there, and that is the purpose of this session, that we get to
I appreciate
take some
your
learning
research.
points.
It takes a lot of time
Sure.
to research so-called well-researched case study, and it's not like we are going to talk about Jack Dorsey or what you call these Steve Jobs and things like that.
Yes.
So yeah, it's well researched, and
Yeah.
I appreciate the questions. Of course, we may not have the other cohorts. In fact,
Yeah.
one of the reasons I like office hours is because within that hour we can meet more people. I'm not sure because I think I missed 2 sessions of your last 2 nights. You did 2, right? So
Yeah, it's the same. It's a repeat of the same, because
Yeah,
we
but
have to do it at different timings. Yes.
Yeah, correct. I appreciate if
case,
you have
same
more
case.
people, because then we
Right.
can. In fact, tonight I'm glad to bump into Lillian because even her inputs are very, very important. So that's
Yes.
why it brings me to this question, Doc, if you don't mind. I think I leave you with an email before, and to the rest of the faculty members, is that why is this office hours being done one-on-one instead of the 1 hour? Because this discussion is very, very important when we have a diverse a group of people. Even tonight with just Lillian, I didn't know she's a Malaysian, and based in Singapore. But it will be, it's great to connect, as well as also to throw ideas within few more brains are better than one, right? If one-on-one, I find it very constrained, especially if we can't book more than 2 times, and I think you guys will be very busy as our lecturers. If there's so many books.
That's a challenge, because the model that we are pursuing, everyone wants to do these kind of sessions, live sessions, and give it sufficient time. However, because of certain structure, these things would get addressed better and better in future. So if you have communicated this, I'm sure it would be considered, and it would be thought through, and people would find a way, because we also experimenting. Earlier we were doing these office hours where it had a certain 1 hour. So
it was
within
good for me
that,
so far.
Yeah.
So far we have done like 6 to 7 concentrations with office hours. It was very good. But I could understand where you are coming from if it's from your angle. Because I myself, I am the industrial advisor for 2 universities and colleges in Malaysia. So I can understand, especially with a global cohort of different time zones, you'll be basically repeating yourself with the breakout rooms, Q&A, case studies. So it will be quite repetitive on your side, but on the student side, I think it adds more value if we can pick our brains among a few of us rather than just one-on-one. So I'm not sure how this is going to be done. Yeah.
I will pass on your words. I would definitely. I think I had seen your email, and others have seen it.
I was the one who CC'd, I think, a few of the faculty members.
Okay.
Probably,
good.
what would be your opinion, Dr. Harsh, on this? Probably from your preference perspective, as well as what do you think would be actually better?
So I would say broadly, there are some pros and cons of both. Not from student perspective, because that you would know the best. But if I put myself in your shoes, I can see the points of Alan. I'm also desirous of interactions, good interaction with students, right? Because after all, we have spent time in institutions with physical classroom, which we do not have here. We have other kind of advantages that I'm able to meet you. I'm able to meet two of you from different parts of the world in this way, right? And so the Quantic model is suited and very suited and appropriate from various angles. But yeah, there are some, if we can create a little simulation where classrooms, interactiveness, there would be a sizable number of students who are for it. So we will see. My opinion is I'm okay. I'm happy to have interaction like this. Let's say if there were even more students up to 15, 20, 30, so that interaction happens around certain topics. I'm okay with that. I have always enjoyed doing case studies in my previous institutions. And so, yeah, maybe the right model will emerge. I hope that gives you a sense of what is my preference.
Yeah, it's good to hear from yourself as well, because for me, I'm okay. It's preferably that the experiment can be done on a newer cohort rather than halfway. I was enjoying the last few consideration, especially those that I couldn't join. I can rewatch the recording. Yeah. But I so prefer a live discussion, and of course, maybe it's the topic, because other than yourself, I think the engagement coordinator, they do some on and off, they do some TED Talk studies or podcasts. Those are attracted a lot of people as well. But of course, it's not so academic. It's not so academic. Right. And I appreciate, example, today now, I think in my cohort, we are doing the leading organization. So it's very much relevant to this. Thankfully, I did the specialization. So it really makes a lot of sense for me to join tonight and speak to you.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, right. So let's look forward. I know some things get experimented during our time, some things improve in the future. But yes, all inputs are welcome, and those are considered and thought through. And going forward, I think we will come up with the optimal model, of how to engage
let us
best.
know if you have any
serve
survey forms. Let us know if you have any survey form, market feedback we can give you for your session. I think it's very good. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I've enjoyed meeting both of you.
My apologies earlier. I was having my late dinner. So I can't on my video. I know it's tough to just talk to a screen. So after I quickly finish up my dinner and on the video, just to make sure that we are engaged eye to eye.
Right.
Great.
Good. Yeah. So all the best. I know it must be late for you guys. So sound sleep, peace. And until we meet, never hesitate to drop in a few lines to different faculty, with your questions. Yep. Sometimes they can do impromptu check-in and do a little conversation, especially if it's briefer. They may not engage for very long because people's schedules are fairly tight, back to back. Oftentimes.
Look forward if you have future session as well. I'm not sure whether because currently my cohort, I'm doing until leading organizations. So I'm not sure whether you'll be involved in other concentration, but definitely I look forward to engage more.
Okay, great. Excellent. Take care. And so long. Wonderful meet you. Stay safe.
Have a good day ahead. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.
Bye.